Is the Lost Glitches the best deck constructor? I've spent a little over a week playing the Lost Glitches. I understand that isn't a lot of time for a TCG, but even in that little time, I feel like the Lost Glitches has really provided me with a sufficient taste of what its deck construction experience is like. There's also something that has deterred me from spending a lot more time with this game, but I'll get to that later. My focus will be on specifically the deck construction experience, but just so that everyone is on the same page as far as what you'll be doing with the decks you construct, here's a brief gameplay overview. The Lost Glitches closely follows the format of games based off of Magic the Gathering, where you will be playing units that will be able to attack and deal damage to the opponent, and also block to protect yourself from the opponent's units. Deal 20 damage to the opponent and you win the game. Each turn, the resources you have to spend on units and other effects increase, allowing for more powerful plays the longer the game goes. So, for the most part, the game isn't doing anything particularly unique gameplay-wise. The one unique thing it adds to the formula are skills. You always have a set of 3 skills, effects you can pay for using a separate resource from the one that you play cards with. I've seen people refer to them as commander skills, as functionally they are somewhat similar to commanders in Magic the Gathering, which are always available to play and don't need to be drawn. However, unlike commanders, your ability to play skills in the Lost Glitches is fairly limited. You often will only be able to play 1, 2, 3 skills given the rate that you gain the resources to play them. Typically, they serve as a clutch boon a couple times per game, rather than something that defines your strategy. Skills also allow for including niche, flashy plays in your deck. Typically in card games, you're discouraged from including flashy cards. Even if those flashy cards immediately win you the game in a niche situation, drawing it instead of a more generally useful card in any other situation really hurts your card economy. It's one less card that you can play unless that niche situation comes up. Skills, on the other hand, can be used any number of times. So even if 2 of your skills rarely have a use case, you're not out resources, as you can keep getting value from another, more generally applicable one. Imagining these scenarios where you make a big flashy play is always exciting, and the skills seem like they make it reasonable to actually consider constructing for these plays. The game splits units into 5 different syndicates. Each of these syndicates has a unique theme and includes a couple of different archetypes. And as a quick note on archetypes, I applaud the game on the uniqueness of its available archetypes, given the card pool size. The Lost Glitches has some tried and true archetypes that you'd see in other games, such as board sprawl or unit recursion, but also has a few fairly unique archetypes that I wouldn't expect from a game with this small of a card pool. I haven't had a chance to construct decks in many of these archetypes, but their uniqueness makes the idea of constructing them more exciting. Anyways, back to talking about syndicates. The syndicates split up the card pool, each having a distinct theme, and are prominently featured in the card's designs. For better or worse, the syndicates have absolutely no mechanical purpose in the game. A deck can combine cards from the different syndicates in any way they please, and I haven't seen any cards effects that reference the syndicate a card is from. So on one hand, the syndicates are just noise you have to ignore. Despite them having no functional purpose, cards are always ordered by syndicate. There's no way to change how the card pool is organized. They always organize by first syndicate, then by cost. Given the syndicates should be completely ignored when constructing a deck, this makes deck lists appear in a seemingly nonsensical order, not organized by unit cost nor name, and rather organized thematically. In this way, syndicates feel like an arbitrary sort of nuisance, more than anything else. On the other hand though, syndicates do suggest how cards can combine. For less experienced players, I could see how that would be helpful. For example, the unit that reduces one ally's power and increases a different ally's power being in the same syndicate as a common 0 power unit could help nudge novices into seeing that you can get around the power loss effect if you simply target a unit that didn't have any power anyway. But more importantly, sorting the archetypes into these syndicates can help players have the feeling that they are breaking the game when deck constructing. For example, Patient Explosive Martyr reduces its power each turn, then destroys itself and deals 3 damage to the opponent when it reaches 0 power. On surface level, it appears like a way of dealing 3 damage to the opponent at only the cost of 1, which is good value. It leaves an opening for the opponent to destroy it before it reaches 0 power, but you can circumvent that by combining it with other cards in the syndicate that reduce your own unit's power. I saw this and thought, I can combine this with a unit from another syndicate that resummons things when they're destroyed, giving me an engine that will repeatedly deal 3 damage to the opponent. I have no idea whether this synergy was intended, but the fact that these cards are from different syndicates gives the impression that they are not. It makes me feel like I cleverly broke the game with an unintended interaction. All that said, while I do see some advantages to how syndicates are presented, I don't agree with how prominent they are, considering they don't have any mechanical purpose. especially given the fact that they make reading card lists and finding specific cards a lot more cumbersome. Skills are also organized in a cumbersome way. You unlock skills through these skill trees, and when you want to look through the skills that you have access to, they are organized based on their position in these skill trees. The skill icon provides little information about the effect of the skill, so you have to mouse over each one. The organization makes this very awkward. Multiple times I thought I remembered a certain skill existing, then spent a minute or so parsing through all the skills to find it, or to find out that I was misremembering, something that should take far less than a minute. The game's terminology choice also makes deck construction more cumbersome. The most common term in the game is glitch, which is what units are called. I don't know about you, but most of the units are depicted as living things, not some digital abnormality. I get that this is probably related to the game's lore, where so much of the world has become digitized that beings not conforming to society are labeled as glitches, but I really had to rewire what my first thought was whenever I read glitch, since its meaning in-game is so different than what glitch typically means. It certainly didn't help that the only other type of card in the game is called software. You know, the thing that can have glitches? Yet glitch was used to describe something that is specifically not software. Even looking past some unintuitive yet thematic terminology, there's other ways that terminology can be unintuitive. When you hear protector, what do you think of? I feel protector is typically associated with positive talents, something you could strive to be. In the Lost glitches, protector is a negative thing. Units with protector cannot attack. This juxtaposition has tripped me up, where I wasn't fully thinking of an ability as a downside, then I use it and realize it is. I've also found inconsistencies in terminology. For example, this card says when this strikes your opponent directly, and this card simply says whenever this strikes your opponent. As far as I can tell, these effects are functionally identical, but the difference in wording makes me reread them a couple times, making sure I'm not missing out on some nuance on how it is worded. There's also a variety of smaller UX-related issues that hamper the deck construction experience. Icons for talents, abilities that many units share, are exceedingly small and hard to make out when browsing your cards. When you scroll down to the bottom of a selection of cards, it automatically jumps back up, meaning that you have to click and hold to see the bottom card's stats. There are additional information pop-ups when looking at cards while deck constructing, which is great, but there are a significant amount of terms that don't have these. Terms like initialize, reinitialize, and recruit don't have them, so it's impossible to know what the difference between these similar sounding effects are without testing a bunch of different interactions with them in a match. And that's if there's a difference between them at all. As I've already mentioned, terminology on the cards isn't super consistent. I've also seen visual glitches where certain stats on cards just aren't visible. Now let's talk about card acquisition. The game starts you off with a single starter deck. There's no choice. I assume everyone gets the exact same starter deck based around sacrificing allies. This was a bit disappointing. For the first little while, I felt the only deck construction I could do was variations on this one archetype. I simply didn't have enough cards in any other archetype to serve as a basis for any other deck. You could use some of the resources you were given at the start of the game to buy another starter deck instead of card packs, and in retrospect that probably would have made the initial experience a little better, as I could have had a second archetype to experiment with, and it would have been an archetype of my choosing. That said, the game seems very generous, at least early on. After 5 or so days, my collection grew to the point where experimenting with other archetypes was feasible. The card acquisition rate certainly slows down after the first week, but I feel like the first week gives you a good basis to be able to continue experimenting with various archetypes and iterating on decks going forward. At this point, with most new packs I open, I see things I'm excited to test in existing or new decks. I'm certainly not constructing top-of-the-line decks a week in, but I feel I have the resources to at least test concepts' viability. However, if you're wanting to build something very specific, things aren't as rosy. You can convert cards in your collection to bits, then spend those bits to gain access to specific other cards. Any 4 cards will get you enough bits for a specific card of the same rarity. But unless you are fine cannibalizing your card pool of high rarity cards, which you likely won't have excess of, for a while you are mostly going to be converting common cards. This is reasonable for creating specific cards at lower rarities, 4 commons for another specific common, 8 commons for a card of the second most common rarity, but the conversion feels prohibitive past that. For the second highest rarity, it takes 80 common cards, and for the highest, you need a whopping 400 common cards. I was going to make a comment about how tedious converting cards to bits was, with having to manually find the cards you have excess of, and having to watch this animation for each one, but while I was preparing this video, the game was updated, addressing both of these issues. which is a good sign that the game is actively being worked on and other smaller issues I've already mentioned may be addressed. Now I'll stress again, the card acquisition rate seems very well paced to give you new things to deck construct with. If you're content just constructing with what you get, there's no issue. But if you are envisioning a very specific deck list and you want to build that, it's going to take you a long time to get the specific rares you'll need for it. On the plus side though, from what I have seen, these super high rarity cards aren't super necessary for a deck. I'm no expert in the game's meta, but my read of the super rare cards is that while they certainly open up new strategic options, they aren't necessarily better than the strategic options at lower rarities. So in all, while not providing anything particularly novel, the Lost Glitches systems builds a very solid deck construction experience. It has a handful of blunders as far as card parsability and UX, but these are more surface level issues, and given they are not systematic issues, probably could be addressed, which I've already witnessed the developer do for one such UX issue. Additionally, card acquisition seems reasonably generous, with a pace that enables continual experimentation and iteration. Unfortunately, there's one last thing I need to cover. If you take a look at my win rate, it is really high. I'm not some Lost Glitches prodigy here, terrorizing the ladder with a new account. The reason my win rate is so high is that I am primarily playing against bots. I don't do this by choice. Your initial ranked games are forced to be bots. I won all of these, and I feel there were a few too many of these bot games. If I wasn't playing the game for this video series, I probably would have quit during those initial bot games. I want to test my decks against people, not bots designed to lose. But even when I made it past the rank where it forces bot games, if you spend over a minute in queue without finding an opponent, it still puts you into a bot game. There seems to be not a lot of people playing the Lost Glitches, so this happens frequently. It feels sort of bad critiquing the game on its small player count, as it becomes a sort of cyclical feedback loop, but these bot games really do degrade the deck construction experience, and are the reason I have no interest in giving the game more time. See, the bots give really bad feedback on how your deck is functioning. On top of them being bad, making any deck look decent, the way they play completely invalidates certain tactics, and makes others seem much better than they should. One of the clear examples of this are cards that remove your opponent's energy. These effects are only useful if the opponent banks energy to react to things you do on your turn. But the bots seem to basically never bank energy. They will play cards if they can. I'm sure against real players playing well, these effects have a place, but with my experience against bots, these effects seem nearly useless. The bot games result in me asking myself, if I can't get accurate feedback on decks I construct, why am I constructing the decks? So, with that said, is the Lost Glitches the best deck constructor? Given the bot games, I have to place it at the bottom. Without the bot games, I would rate it fairly high. Again, as I previously said, the systems it has in place make for a solid deck construction experience. If you like deck construction, and you want to share deck construction with others, you should try Sealed Monsters. Sealed Monsters has been designed to be a roughly 1-hour deck construction board game that's easy to pick up even for players who have never touched a CCG before. Everything needed to play with 4 players is included in one box, and the deck construction happens during play. No one has to prepare anything before the game. You can try the game on Tabletop Simulator now, or in browser on screentop.gg. You can also follow the upcoming Kickstarter campaign and join playtests on the Discord. Links are in the video's description.